I'm supposed to do this several months ago, but every time we had a Toastmasters meeting, I had a conflict with a different work thing. So finally, I get to introduce myself after a few months. All right, so this is me. It's my very first speech as a Toastmasters. So my name is Jenny Rivera Hartleben. I was born and raised in Chicago, a child of two Mexican immigrants who came to the U.S. for a better chance at life. My maternal grandfather emigrated to the U.S. first in search of work. He was initially undocumented when he made his way over. His journey to America was what many would consider abysmal, distressing, and downright surreal in a negative way. He was one resilient but grumpy man. And as he started working, he would send back money to my grandmother in Mexico to support her and her children. He would also return to Mexico, of course, to visit occasionally. And of course, over time, he managed to get all the documentation needed to get all of his siblings and his wife and his kids over to the U.S., what we call the American dream. So my mom emigrated at this time to the U.S. at about the age of 13, and she was the second eldest of the siblings, 10 children total. In lieu of education, she was responsible for taking care of her younger siblings while my grandparents worked. She lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with 9 other siblings and her 2 parents in a kind of poor and dangerous part of the city of Chicago. She did meet my dad in Chicago, and she was married by the age of 20. My parents are still married, but she did go through a very tumultuous relationship with him for the first 8 to 10 years of their relationship because he was an alcoholic and a heavy drug user. But that's a story for another time. As I said, they're still married because he did change his vices and now he lives a very religious lifestyle. So now flash forward several years to when I was born. You see, because my parents lived in less than comfortable state, all they wanted was for my brother and I to have everything that they did not have. They worked very hard in blue-collar factory jobs, working overnight shifts sometimes. I do remember my mom waking up in the middle of the night as a small child, taking me to my grandmother's house for childcare. And so can you imagine getting up at 2 a.m., getting ready for work, driving a kid to grandma's house, and then taking an overnight shift in the Chicago winter where it could get down to negative 20 degrees Celsius. Anyways, they had the American dream in mind this whole time. They worked and managed to save enough money to buy a house in the suburbs outside of the city. They both wanted a better life for us, which is why they chose the suburbs. To them, the city meant danger and not a good environment for children to grow up. The first few years at the suburbs, I had a normal and fun childhood. It wasn't until I started school that I noticed the small things that made me feel like an outsider. I lived in an affluent neighborhood where 90% of the population were white and were of upper middle to wealthy status. I didn't quite look like anyone else. Spanish was my first language, so I was put into English as a second language at school. So I really stuck out like a sore thumb there. I didn't even know how to speak up to ask for the bathroom. Regardless, I still had a nice few years in school, making some friends, going to birthday parties, getting involved, and I eventually learned English, of course. And as the years passed and I got into middle school and high school, this is where I started to notice the bigger differences. Of course, at this age, kids just want to fit in and be part of this in crowd. But going to a school as affluent as I did with white kids, I was neither one of those, so I just didn't really feel like I belonged or fit in. So where do I start with my non-belongness, if that is a word? I didn't get dropped off in nice cars. I didn't have the same skin tone as others. I didn't have blue eyes. I didn't have the nice clothes like others, although my parents did try the very best to buy me the types of clothes when they had a little extra money, when they could. So I really just tried to assimilate the best I could, even trying to stay away from other Mexican kids in school. And at that time, I really just wished I was white, which, I know is quite sad now looking back. Considering that my parents were immigrants and their low level of education, they really did not understand or know much about the schooling system. They really couldn't guide me much in my studies, and they couldn't help me with my schoolwork. Despite this, I had decent grades and I got involved. I was in the orchestra for about 10 years. And the story continues on into college and beyond, where my views on the world and on myself and my culture begin to shift. And that will be part 2 of my story. But for now, I'd like to close by saying that my parents did the very best they could with the knowledge and resources they had. They were always around, they were caring, and they were very loving in their own way. And it wasn't until after high school that I started to realize and truly appreciate the hardships that they went through to give myself and my brother a better life. And as I get older, the more grateful I am. And it is now my responsibility to take care of them in the best way that I can. So this is me.
You guys, both speech traditions?
Yes.